Hey friends, family, followers, and subscribers. It's your fellow man of letters and favorite Winchester brother, Bradford here to do not a Wheel of Time video, not a Supernatural video, shockingly not another character examination, but instead I'm doing a movie review. This time it is on the newest Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Another quick aside, I did just move, yet again. This is my new place. It's much larger than the old one. And I've never had a TV in my room before, so kind of a big deal. There won't be a particular flow to this. I'm just going to dive in and give you some of my now better baked thoughts of what I thought of this story, the direction it was taken in, some issues I had with it, and also some really high praise, and where it ranks for me in terms of all Marvel stories, including the Disney Plus TV shows. So that being said, let's dive in. Right off the bat, to get into some of the development of this movie, there were some complications early on in the production process. The original director of the first Doctor Strange movie, Scott Derrickson, left the project pre-pandemic due to some creative differences that he had with the higher-ups in the Marvel chain of command. So Kevin Feige, being a genius that he is, brought in renowned horror director Sam Raimi to helm the ship. And while I will say Sam Raimi did a really, really good job with this movie, there are a lot of questions about how he went about some characters' arcs. And I'm going to try to leave this as spoiler-free as I can. But there were a lot of questions that I had. One particular note I do want to point out is that the head writer for this movie, Michael Waldron, was also the head writer on the Disney Plus TV show Loki. And while there were a lot of expectations thinking this was going to set up more of the multiverse storytelling for years to come, it was more of a self-contained Doctor Strange story. And also, that being said, more of a sequel to WandaVision rather than a Doctor Strange-centered film. And so that brings me to another controversial point. Wanda's character journey in this movie was a little interesting. I didn't mind bits of it. I understood some of her motivations, but overall how it was executed was a little messy. This came out after the movie was released on May 6, 2022. Sam Raimi spoke to a website called The Mary Sue and said this: "I just know that halfway, or maybe 3/4 of the way into our writing process, I'd first heard of this show they were doing and that we would have to follow it. Therefore, we really had to study what WandaVision was doing so that we could have a proper through line and character growth dynamic. I never even saw all of WandaVision. I've just seen key moments of some episodes that I was told directly impact our storyline." He said this, he actually didn't say this in the Mary Sue, they're just quoting him. He told this to Rolling Stones. But that being said, it did raise a lot of issues I had. So I'm really trying to avoid spoiler territory here, but after WandaVision absolutely made us fall in love with Wanda Maximoff, the decisions here were confusing. Basically, the decisions were confusing because it really felt like a massive retcon of WandaVision. Ultimately, where Wanda ended up at the end of the show was she expressed remorse for her enslavement of an entire town and resolved to try and be more heroic. It really just felt like those motivations and her grappling with what she had done versus what she was being drawn into by the Darkhold
that tension was really jarring and wasn't explained very well.
It felt like the movie was more centered around her overall character arc instead of Doctor Strange's overall character arc. Where in movies past, where, say, Spider-Man No Way Home, Doctor Strange was central to the role of the movie. In this movie, it felt like he was just he was a supporting character in his own movie, which is really odd to say. It's just I wish they'd done something a little bit more with it. And while I will mention later on in this video, I did enjoy his character development. I really, really did. It was more so you're learning more about who Doctor Strange is as it comes to motivations. You're learning a little bit more about his backstory. You're learning a little bit more about what drives him. Also, how his morality is not in terms of shades of gray, but much more in black and white. When you pair him up against a character like Tony Stark, who's also wanting to do the right thing, where Doctor Strange is driven by this very broad black and white sense of morality because of his history as a surgeon, Tony Stark is driven by his own code. He's not driven by what's good for the grand picture. He's driven by what will clear his conscience. So in that sense, and also to add on to Strange's sense of his moral compass, Strange wants to be in control of everything and sees things in black and white because of that medical background. But also on Tony and Doctor Strange are on both sides of the same scale, in which narcissism is the fulcrum. And that's something I think really gets brought to the forefront in this movie. Strange thinks he can fix everything. Strange thinks he can control everything. And he thinks in binaries. And that's just a fascinating concept. And that's one of the things I loved about this movie. The more I've sat on this, and after seeing the movie a second time, it started to grow on me. I really enjoyed his character in this movie. While some of the decisions he made were questionable, I think there was evidence of overall the direction Raimi and Waldron and now Eric Martin, who will be head writing season 2 of Loki. He was also in the writing room for this movie, I believe. They were all having conversations back and forth to try to make this a seamless transition from WandaVision, but also from Spider-Man No Way Home, Endgame, Infinity War, the first Doctor Strange movie, and Thor Ragnarok, all of which Doctor Strange has appeared in. The theory behind it was good. The execution was a little messy. Not gonna lie.
Just a couple more quick negatives. Sorry, last minute interjection, but the pacing of this movie was relentless. It was moving so quick, barely took any time to slow down. And I know I've already said there were some nice character development moments for Doctor Strange, for Wanda Maximoff, but at the same time, there wasn't a lot of time to actually slow down and see how things progressed throughout the movie. And that was really frustrating because it was the shortest Marvel movie in about 3 to 4 years, only at 126 minutes, at an hour and 56 minutes of actual film, not including the stingers. That was a little frustrating because they could have used that time to explain the canon. They could have used that time for character building. They could have used that time for making some of the more controversial storytelling decisions make sense.
But I don't want this review to be all negative.
Okay, so now that we have some of the more negative aspects, more negative responses from my end towards the movie, I want to get into some more of the positives. Even though I thought this was going to be a much bigger MCU event, the story was focused a lot on Doctor Strange himself and how all of the variants across each universe that we went to connected in some way or some form to his key characteristic of he wants to be in control of everything. That's not to try and spoil the movie, but that was something that really stood out to me as I watched it a second time. It sat with me a lot better but he still did have to make some really difficult choices. Some other things that I really enjoyed: Sam Raimi's visual aesthetic for horror and genuine unnerving visuals was amazing. There's one particular scene involving one character crawling out of a reflection, and their body is just disjointed and scarred and gory, and it looks horrifying, but it looks amazing at the same time. Other things that Sam Raimi did really well were how, in my opinion, I thought the 838 universe looked great. Some powers on display from certain characters were awesome, and honestly, just like, it had a very unnerving vibe. The whole movie was Marvel's first attempt into horror, and I enjoy horror, so it was cool to actually see it somewhat on screen. And lastly, some of the things I really enjoyed about this movie were how it was sort of setting up future MCU projects. We had a lot of great cameos that were truly a joy to be surprised by, and caught me off guard. At least I gasped aloud, and my friend in the theater with me was like, holy crap. So that was really cool, and just all around great showing for some of our favorite alternate selves, and just really cool cameos, but also some good character work from Doctor Strange.
Now, this is the actual last positive, I promise. But the introduction of America Chavez was truly a joy. She stole every scene she was in, and I enjoyed her seeing her bicker with Strange, with Wanda, with Wong, even. Just their banter back and forth just proves how much Kevin Feige and his team really do understand how to cast the characters well, with a few exceptions. I'm looking at you. Thor and Odin in the first two Thor movies. But America Chavez was truly a joy in this movie. I really enjoyed her character and seeing her come into her own. So I'm looking forward to seeing more stories with her in the future. But that was my last positive.
So after hearing those positives, I really do want to praise the acting in this movie. Benedict Cumberbatch, who's one of my personal all-time favorite actors, just brought it to Doctor Strange in this movie. The humor, the wit, the emotion, honestly, the cold, calculating decision-making he has to do in literally every scene he has, but also the understanding and the compassion that he also has for wanting to do the right thing, not just on an individual scale, but on a much larger, we'll say, multiversal scale. Don't even get me started on Elizabeth Olsen. Oh my gosh. The girl brought it. The girl absolutely brought it. While her storyline wasn't everything I was wanting out of this movie, she deserves every award that she's not nominated for and more, because her portrayal of Wanda Maximoff is out of this world, quite literally. Rachel McAdams actually had something to do in this movie, which was really cool. And after listening to some podcasts and hearing their reviews on the relationship between Steven and Christine from the first movie and in this movie versus, say, like Tony Stark and Pepper Potts in the Iron Man and Avengers movies, there's not, like, on screen, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of chemistry between Benedict Cumberbatch and Rachel McAdams. However, their story is still compelling. There's just not as much charisma as there was between Robert Downey Jr. and Gwyneth Paltrow anytime they shared the screen together. On another note, I really enjoyed the mythology of this movie. While it didn't necessarily tie into the larger MCU as a whole, it did introduce some really cool, compelling things to think about when it comes to the multiverse. While I wish it had tied better into stories like Loki, and let's be real here, Sam Raimi really needed to watch all of WandaVision. 1, because it's fabulous, and 2, so he could have had a better grip on how to handle Wanda's character in this movie. I will not back down from that comment. While I did just say I think it works as a Doctor Strange movie, and I think it works better as a Doctor Strange movie than as an MCU crossover event, I still would have liked to see it be something similar to Captain America the Winter Soldier, which had massive ramifications for the rest of the MCU, or Infinity War, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. And honestly, I will make this note. I have been, one, a little bit burned out from Marvel storytelling, just given how much content Disney is putting out there. And 2, the overall quality of the storytelling is going downhill a little bit. 3, I don't know where they're going with Phase 4 and beyond. And that's really concerning because you knew at the end of Avengers, you knew where the story was going very easily. You just knew. All that being said, my final review of this movie is a 7.1 out of 10, which is above average.
I did want to throw that in there because it's still so fun. These characters are always fun to return to. This world and worlds are always fun to return to. So I really enjoy that aspect of the MCU movies, and especially of this movie.
But it still ranks pretty low on my Marvel list. Out of all the TV shows and movies that we've seen from the MCU thus far, I have it ranked 18 out of 34 from best to worst on my list of favorites. It's in the bottom part of the middle third of those rankings, but it's much better than, say, Thor 2 or Eternals or Iron Man 3 or Ant-Man and the Wasp or even Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which I'm not going to lie, I was not a big fan of. And that's putting it lightly. And I really thank you guys for hearing my more developed thoughts on Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. So I'm going to head back to the bunker now. And in the meantime, just remember...
Driver picks the music.
Shotgun shuts.